So we are in the Easter season of resurrection, and since we've walked our way through Lent to the cross and to the empty tomb, we realize that in all of our walking and journeying up to this point, we've not reached a destination per se, but a starting point. It's what the disciples on the road to Emmaus, which the road was leading away from the epicenter of Jesus' ministry, his passion, and his resurrection, but what they found there turned them right back around for a new beginning. The resurrection was not the end of the story, of course, but a beginning, and that's just the first surprising thing about the resurrection. There are at least three other things that I want to lift up this morning that are surprising about the resurrection that are revealed on the road to Emmaus. And that is, first, that it was more a this-worldly experience. It was more about this world than it was about another other world. Secondly, that the resurrected Christ was more unfamiliar than familiar. And third, it was for everyone more unbelievable than believable. So first of all, whatever the resurrection was, and there was not a clearly defined, delineated sense of that, even among people that encountered Jesus. But whatever it was more about this world than about the next world. Jesus didn't float as a ghost up to the disciples on the road to Emmaus as a specter or something and say, guess what? I've saved your souls from hell and now you're going to heaven. Jesus didn't say that. Isn't it interesting and worth noting that in none of the resurrection appearances does Jesus make any mention of heaven and hell? That which fundamentalist Christianity has made it all about. Nowhere does the resurrected Christ say that he saved our souls and that was the whole point. I'm not saying that there isn't an element of salvation for our souls that involved in the resurrection, but that wasn't what Jesus came back to say. In fact, the gospel writers go out of their way to be really, really clear that one, Jesus in his resurrected self is a physical, this worldly presence. Here, touch my wounds. Let me have fish to eat. I'll break this bread with you. He breathed peace on the disciples. And secondly, that he's got business for them to do in the here and now. He's got work, his work that needs to be continued, and that is the healing and saving of this world. Get back to Jerusalem, get back to Galilee, and share with people the good news of God's love for this world. Jesus' resurrection is bodily, with wounds and all. It's historical. It's political. It's not otherworldly, actually. It's not. I mean, for sure there are implications there, but everything in the resurrection accounts suggests that it's this world that the resurrected Christ and God thereby cares about. The healing of it, the care of it, the transformation of it coming through God's love. The point is not about the afterlife. The point is about the present life of the world that God so loves. That Jesus conquered death, because that's one of the Easter claims, means that we no longer need to be determined by fear and death, but are freed for love, no matter how far that love takes us. The greatest weapon of the empire, of the powers that be, the greatest weapon that they have against us is to take away our freedom and our lives, and that power is taken away from the powers. And that's some of the political implication of the resurrection. The powers are defanged by Jesus. And now we can proclaim that our freedom comes from someplace deeper, you can't grant me my freedom or not, country, world, corporation, whomever in this world. That comes from God, and our life is secured in God. You can't end me either. God has me. It means we can be radically committed to God's purposes and God's vision for this world, and no longer need to be dictated by the limitations and injustices and violence of this world. This world. The second surprising thing that's worth noting is this: that whatever the resurrection was, the risen Christ was not familiar to even his closest friends. He was a stranger. The gospel writers go out of their way here again to make it clear that Jesus did not come back to the disciples as a familiar friend, as the good old teacher, as the Lord that they had come to know, but as a mystery and a stranger. Mary didn't even recognize him. She thought he was the gardener. Talk about a physical reality of the resurrection. She thought he was the gardener. The gospel writers go out of their way to say that he was a stranger. And there's an important difference here to note between the disciples welcoming Jesus back into their clan and their old reality and what actually happened, which was Jesus, the resurrected Christ, welcomed them into his world and his reality. The disciples on the road to Emmaus had this experience in a dramatic way at the table, right? That's when their eyes and hearts were opened. They thought they were hosts welcoming this man in for the night and offering him a meal, this man who had revealed the scriptures to them. They thought they were being the hosts until that epiphany moment, and they realized, no, they weren't the hosts. The stranger, the guest, was the host, and they were the guests sitting at his table. He broke the bread for them and opened their hearts and their eyes to this invitation to a new reality. And why this is important for what follows is because as the disciples then take up the task of sharing this incredible news of God's love and God's salvation and God's and Jesus's the expression of God's presence in the world as the resurrected Christ, as they share that news and invite people into the reality of this new reality, they find that they are guests themselves in this economy, in this household of God, rather than the owners of it. Right? They are not people on the inside. Yep, we were with Jesus all along. You can come in. We'll let you come on in here. No, it didn't work that way. They belong because this resurrected Christ welcomed them in, this stranger who was God, who is God, the resurrected Christ, welcomed them in, and they then welcome others because that's what the host expects of them, not due to any privileged place of their own. Most of what we have is gift to us. Our very lives themselves is gift. And it is incumbent upon us to share the gift, share as gift, the gift given unto us. And finally, it's worth noting that whatever the resurrection was, it was not a believable thing that happened. It was unbelievable. If you wonder yourself if the resurrection is true, if it really happened, then guess what? You are among so many. It's not like even those to whom Jesus appeared directly and immediately in bodily form 2,000 years ago were like, oh, I believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Rather, they themselves were baffled, bewildered, stupefied, dumbfounded, confused, doubtful, suspicious, saying, "What the heck is going on? I cannot believe my eyes." So it's not like it was 2,000 years ago before the Enlightenment and the scientific method, and so people were gullible, like, "Oh yeah, there's Jesus, he was dead, and now he's resurrected. Yep, that's reasonable." It wasn't reasonable or believable at all. And most reasonable people didn't believe it at all. And even those who encountered him directly really struggled with how to even talk about it. How do we even talk about this? Describe this, explain what this is about. And out of that struggle came a ton of ways to think and talk about it. A ton. Why he died, how he came back, what that meant for humanity. Was he human? Was he divine? What did it say about God? What did it say about us? What does the past mean? What does the present mean now? What is the future going to bring? And so on and so on and so forth. And if anyone tells you there is a single clear answer to all that, do not believe them. So don't think, if you feel somewhat skeptical of the resurrection claim, that you are unique in that. And don't think that because you believe in science that it disqualifies you from believing in the resurrection. They are not mutually exclusive, and there's nothing now known by the scientific mind that wasn't known then to the pre-modern mind, which proves the truth of the resurrection any more or less than it does now. And please don't think that you, among all others, shouldn't be a part of the church or consider yourself a Christian because you're not sure what you believe about the resurrection. You know how many people I talk to as your pastor who have questions about that? You know how many people across the world and across the ages have had questions about that? Do you know how many of the people who had direct physical, material encounter with the resurrected Christ had questions about that? Believing in the resurrection is a matter of faith, which doesn't mean you can't believe in science or must shirk your intellectual integrity to believe it. Maybe it means that you make room in your intellect for the fact that you don't know everything. I'm just saying. Science doesn't know everything. And there is truth here that's deep and abiding and transformative. Like that the resurrection proclaims that the deepest thing in this world is the love of the one who created it. And the resurrection proclaims that there is a kingdom of life that runs a truer, deeper, more powerful course than the kingdoms we see around us. And that that's where our allegiance belongs, to the deeper one. And the resurrection proclaims that we are not alone. And the resurrection proclaims that we are called to give of ourselves because our lives are a gift given to us by the divine. And with Jesus as our model, the complete and utter pouring out of himself to the world is our call as his followers. And the resurrection proclaims that the end of what we see and what we know is no ending, but a beginning. The end of what we see and what we know is no ending at all, but a beginning. These are some of the truths that the resurrection reveals. So don't allow the irrationality of the resurrection to dissuade you from the truth of it. For there is more than what we can rationally grasp as human beings. It's all mostly mystery, but a mystery that asks and expects something of us, is what we say. I even wonder at times, could our agnosticism or our claiming not to know what we believe or our skepticism, could it be a protective response to keep us from having to face what the gospel of a resurrected Christ asks of us? I'm just wondering out loud here. Wondering for myself, wondering for you. The disciples on the road to Emmaus had some remarkable encounter with a living reality that was the crucified Jesus. That was this revelation, this huge transformational moment, encounter with God, God's self, they were certain. And it changed everything for them and so many around them, and then for the world. It wasn't an idea to decide whether they believed in it or not, but it was this life-changing encounter that determined the shape of their lives and the world from then on. And then they tried to piece together the theology of it, the parse out intellectually what it meant. But it was this life-changing encounter that was the heart of it. And we too be open to that real presence, the truth of the risen Christ, even now, with an openness of mind and heart to see what that presence asks of us in our lives. But I should probably be careful about what I am asking on your behalf.